Hello. This week, we're talking about the 1992 film Candyman. And I've got my mirror here, ready to go. I'm just gonna give this a try. Open mic night of the living dead. 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 Open mic night of the living dead.
The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead.
I was holding it, and the whole time that was great. The dog was also staring at you every time you said it, more and more intently from his puddle of sun that he's found here in the studio.
And now he's licking his crotch.
Yep, that's where we're at today.
I'm John.
I'm Rachel.
And we're a married couple who met at an open mic night. And then we got an apartment in Chicago and things went downhill from there.
No, we didn't.
I know, I started lying.
That's fair. That's an accurate response to the state of the world right now.
Don't talk about that.
Fair.
People come here to escape that.
They do, except that through horror, we explore the horrors of the actual world, but we're not going to talk about that because we're talking about Candyman today.
Yes. Love this movie. What is your first memories of this movie, if you have any?
I think we watched this movie together.
That was the first time you saw it?
I think it's the first time I remember it. That's true for a lot of these movies. Maybe I saw it at one point in the past, but I don't have a deep memory of it otherwise. What about you?
I definitely remember watching it in late middle school or high school, probably high school. I rented it, watched it with either a girlfriend or some other friends, and I thought it was cool at the time, but I was definitely not smart enough, or I want to say like more like conscious,
I think.
Enough to really get it, because what I was expecting, and we'll get more into this in a little bit, but I was expecting really, a slasher. I was expecting man with a hook going around slashing people up. And if you're going in with that expectation and you're 16 years old, then this movie's not going to hit quite the same way as it does when you're taking the movie on its own terms. And I mean, I definitely think this is an amazing film. I liked it then, but I didn't know why there wasn't more hooking and slashing, and I didn't quite get the whole lore.
Yeah, agreed. I certainly did not see how deep it was until watching it as an adult. And I think that's true for a lot of these films, that as we watch them as adults with more experience, more understanding, not only of the genre, but also just the world and life experience, and identifying with different people in the movies than you did when you're 16, right? Like as a middle-aged parent, different perspective in a lot of these films. So we are going to have a lot of spoilers, though. We should mention that.
Yep. This is one of our deep dive episodes. So we're diving deep. We're not holding back. We're going to cover every aspect of this movie, probably to some extent. So if you have not seen this movie yet, we highly recommend you do.
Yes.
So go check it out, unless you want to ride along with us without having seen it. I know some listeners like to do that too. So buckle up, baby. I'm going to start saying that now.
Oh, good. Really excited to see how that plays in various social situations. And one more, we always have a spoiler warning for our deep dive episodes, but for this particular episode, also just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of racial themes and questions and things that are brought up in this, and we are middle-aged white couple who lives in the country. So a lot of the parts of this film that point to parts of the Black experience in the United States specifically, which we are going to be talking about, we recognize that we come from a very particular perspective. And so I have, because that was my assignment, but I've leaned on the writing and the research of a lot of people who bring a different perspective to that. And so just want to acknowledge that we are coming into what can sometimes be a sensitive subject, recognizing where we're coming to it from. So just want to put that out there at the beginning.
That being said, let me tell you a little bit about when this movie came out. Candyman was released in the United States on October 16th, 1992. Were you aware that we watched the UK version?
I think you mentioned that at one point.
It's just slightly different. It's the same runtime, from what I understand. We got a little bit extra gore. So, because we have the Arrow Video 4K release of Candyman. I think it's the UK release, actually. It gives you the option of both. And when I saw that the UK version was a little bit bloodier, that's what I rolled for us. But anyway, this movie was written and directed by Bernard Rose, based on the short story The Forbidden by Clive Barker in his Books of Blood series, which was first published in 1985, starring Virginia Madsen, Tony Todd, Alexander Berkeley, Cassie Lemons, among others. With a runtime of 101 minutes, it moves at a pretty great clip. It first premiered at the 1992 Toronto International Film Festival at Midnight Madness. And its budget it's different in a couple of places, but somewhere from $8 to $9 million. And it grossed around $26 million. In today's money, the budget would have been around $20 million, making $60 million or so.
That's within our lifetime, just that inflation.
Yeah.
That's crazy times.
That's in like 75% of our lifetime. That's not even our full lifetime.
I know, that's nuts. But obviously this was a commercial success.
Yeah, for sure. And it did well in terms of some of its critical reception as well. In terms of awards, at the Saturn Awards, Virginia Madsen was nominated for Best Actress. And then there's something called the Avoriaz Fantastic Film Festival. I'm near certain I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Avoriaz. I guess I don't know how else you would say it. But in 1993, it won 3 awards. Best Actress for Virginia Madsen, Philip Glass won Best Music, and Bernard Rose won the Audience Award. I was mentioning earlier, upon my first watch, I was expecting more of a slasher film, and that's because Candyman arrived at the tail end of the 1980s slasher boom, which was during a period of franchise fatigue. I meant to look up where we were in this different franchises. Now, don't get me wrong. I love me some late franchise, Halloween, Friday the 13th, not necessarily Nightmare on Elm Street later films, but I do enjoy those movies, but they certainly are not what film critics might call good.
Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan came out in 89. And then Jason Goes to Hell was out in 93. Nightmare on Elm Street, the series had ended with Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare in 91. Halloween 5 in 89. Child's Play 3 in 91. And yeah, so kind of, it was like a little doldrum kind of.
And the movie that had come out that I still go back and forth on whether I consider it a true horror film was Silence of the Lambs. I think that was in 1990. So that was certainly an injection of style and higher brow. Would you consider Silence of the Lambs to be like elevated?
I think probably elevated horror. It's got way more thriller DNA than a lot of things, but it certainly is considered horror by a lot of folks who are not horror fans, right? That it is on that edge. But I think you're right, kind of a precursor to the elevated horror of kind of watching something with fascination as it develops, as opposed to here's the gore, When's the next kill? Yeah, I think it's more on that edge between horror and thriller. But yes.
So the genre was in transition, and obviously sort of the slasher realm got revitalized by Scream, but that wouldn't happen for another 4 years. And original adult-oriented horror films were increasingly rare, especially in like wide theatrical release at this time. That being said, the critical reception was mixed, but there were often positive reviews. The critics were divided on its bleak tone and brutality, while frequently acknowledging its intelligence and its ambition. First, for some of the negative or skeptical reviews, Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times criticized the film as repellent and preposterous, arguing its extremity overwhelmed narrative credibility.
Okay,
Kevin. Kevin! That was a tribute to Catherine O'Hara I just did. And Entertainment Weekly suggested the film's grim seriousness made it oppressive rather than entertaining. And Variety noted that while ambitious and well-performed, the film's bleakness might limit mainstream appeal. But those are balanced out certainly by the positive reviews. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times said, "What I liked was a horror movie that was scaring me with ideas and gore instead of simply with gore. Candyman has an intellectual center, and it's willing to trust the audience to follow it." Janet Maslin of the New York Times praised the film's unusually strong visual style, seriousness, and the grave operatic weight of Philip Glass's score. And Time Out described the film as one of the most intelligent and stylish horror films to come out of America in years.
That last one is the one I agree with the most.
Yeah, certainly. Although, happy to see Ebert saying nice things. Ebert!
So I think that the ratings reflect some of that. Like the critics liked it, but some ambiguity. I think some people who, again, went in expecting slasher were somewhat disappointed. IMDb, it's a 6.7.
Yeah, it's definitely low.
Which matches the 64% fan rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But critics, 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I think it's funny, before you just went through what you went through, I had not considered Candyman elevated horror because it is so gory. But I actually think that it is more in line with that than with the slashers.
And is it so gory?
It's the kills are very gory, but we've talked about elevated horror as having this kind of long ramping up of tension until the violence appears. And in this movie, we don't even see Candyman until 45 minutes in, almost halfway through. And until we don't have that really graphic violence until, and it's kind of in these bursts, right? So I actually think this is a very early on in the elevated horror field. Anyway, Metacritic 61, similar to IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. Letterboxd is only a 3.7. Yeah, I disagree with the crowd on this one. This has got one of my highest personal ratings on my rating scale, which is a 5-star rating. I've given this film a 4.5. This is one of my favorite horror movies.
And on my personal ratings of 1 to 10 0 to 10 with half stars available, I give it an 8.
Yeah. I did bounce back and forth. I had given this a 4.5 the last time we watched it. And then this time I was like, maybe a 4. But then I thought about it and realized that no, this kind of inches out. This is up there for me with other horror classics like The Thing. Although I don't remember if I've given that a 4.5 or a 5. Either way, this is up there. And then for our podcast rating system, which is a very simple-ish, 1, 2, or 3, 1 being absolute trash, 2 being the majority of movies that we watch, and 3 being must-see, part of the canon. You should watch this if you haven't and you're curious about what horror can be. I give this a 3. I'm not sure if you do, but for me, this is really important in the canon.
I think I'm closer to a 2+.
Yeah.
3-.
Yeah, not a high 3.
I literally laid it awake at night thinking about it.
I would go low 3. I wouldn't say high 3, but I would say I think this is a really important movie for what it does. And how it explores those questions that horror does such a good job with.
There are just aspects of it that I think are problematic. And I don't mean problematic like the way we say it today, meaning that there's, something cancelable about it.
Right.
I just mean there's some issues. It's not perfect. And I find myself enjoying it less if I think too much about it while I'm watching it. And I'm not just letting it sort of more wash over me, which is the best way to watch any movie, I think, a lot of the time. But this movie also invites you to think about it at the same time. And sometimes I end up getting lost a bit in some of the what's going on, what's really going on of it all. And I think that's why it can't be a 3 for me at this time. But that could change. I think I enjoyed it slightly less this watch than I did the last watch, which we watched it last year.
I think so, yeah.
And maybe I was just in the wrong mood at the time. I mean, I really enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong.
That's fair. No, that's fair. And as always, ratings are subjective. If you like a movie, you should love a movie for whatever reason you want to. And I think the difference between a high 2 and a low 3 on our very subjective rating system is not all that much. So
I know, except it's the difference between being in the top tier and grouped with almost everything else. And that's why I'm torn on it, because I do think to some extent it belongs at a higher tier, but I'm not sure it quite gets there. So
that's fair. That's fair. Good thing it's all made up.
Yep.
All right. I think that's it for kind of our introductory setting the stage. Shall we move into story time?
Let's do it. Time. It's when we tell the stories. Story time.
Do you sometimes worry that you have set yourself up for an ever more difficult series of podcasts where you have to come up with a new song for story time every time? I don't think you should put too much pressure on yourself, is all I'm saying.
What are you talking? Are you complaining?
I'm not complaining.
Are you criticizing? Was that not good?
No, it wasn't not good. It was good. I'm just saying that every time, this is now our 14th movie, maybe 13th movie. I can't remember. I'll look at the list. That's a lot of songs to come up with on the fly.
Listen, my brain is a fly magnet. It's a fly swatter.
Dead and rotting.
I swat the flies on the fly.
I would like to tell you what the summary of the story for this is. It is exactly the same on Letterboxd and IMDb, which is unusual. They usually have different summaries, but this one, the Candyman, a murderous soul with a hook for a hand, is accidentally summoned to reality by a skeptic grad student researching the monster's myth. As far as summaries go, that's not too bad.
Yeah, that's good. That sets you up.
Yeah.
And tells you what you need to know. And it's accurate.
Yes, it is accurate.
Oh, what was the one a few weeks ago?
I think it was Final Destination.
Oh, yeah, where it was like, boy saves people, then dies.
And then you're like, no. He did not prevent the tragedy from happening.
Right.
Like,
yeah, that plane still exploded, baby.
Yeah, everybody dies.
What did I say my new phrase was going to be? Buckle up, baby.
Buckle up, baby.
I can't wait to do that at parent-teacher conference. All right. You want me to get into production a little bit here?
I do want you to get into production.
So this movie, as I stated earlier, was written and directed by Bernard Rose. He was born in 1960 in London. He was a graduate of the National Film and Television School. And Rose was drawn to Clive Barker's story because it treated horror as a societal process and examined how myths are created and sustained by belief and community. Have you read the story?
I did.
Nice.
Yes. So we can talk about that either here or later.
I've got a place for it coming up soon.
Great.
And Barker's story was published in 1985 And Rose worked on adapting the material for several years before production, ultimately relocating the story from Liverpool to Chicago to explore American racial and urban dynamics. I usually have a list of other movies.
He hasn't done a lot. I did a little bit of dive on him too because I found him really interesting. But he turned down a career working with major studios to make his own films on digital camera, I think in the 90s. So I think he hasn't made a lot of really...
I don't think there was digital camera in the 90s.
I'm not sure when. I think it was when it first started coming out is when he kind of left the industry. There was one 2015. He did a version of Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
That looked kind of interesting. He's done a lot of kind of independent things. And I think he did some music videos too back in the 80s.
I meant to see if he did any music videos of note, and I failed.
There was a few, I think. But yeah, I was surprised at how unfamiliar with his work I was. He also did Paper House in 88, I guess.
That was the one, I guess when people are talking about Bernard Rose and Candyman, I guess Paper House, which I have not seen, has a similar visual style or something. I guess it's worth watching.
Oh, yeah.
From what I've heard.
I'll throw that on the list for sure. I had a couple of other things about him.
Yeah.
If you've got... So he worked as a gopher in the Puppet Workshop on the last season of The Muppet Show.
Yes, he did a couple of things with Jim Henson. I think he also worked on Dark Crystal.
Yeah, which is really kind of cool and interesting, thinking about the special effects and the fantastical nature of this movie. Also, he's good friends with Sam and Ted Raimi, which explains the cameo.
Yes.
Also, do you know whose father he is?
Rose McGowan.
Good guess. Ruby Rose.
Oh.
That's what I said when I read that. I was like, oh, of course. So yeah, Ruby Rose's father, which also might explain some of her wackiness and the intense roles that she takes if this is the kind of work that her dad does. I did not know that. So those were just a few of the things I noticed about him as I was diving into this.
She's kind of like Rose McGowan.
I guess.
Is there like a Jeopardy category where they take like two names and they like overlap them? So the clue would be like, what was that show Ruby Rose was in? The Orange is the New Black?
Yeah.
Orange is the New Black and original Scream star. So it would be Ruby Rose McGowan.
Oh. If they don't, they should, and they should hire you to write the questions.
Yeah, that was really eloquent the way I did it.
It was so eloquent.
So, principal photography on this movie ran from early November of 1991 through late December of that year. And the Chicago exteriors included the real Cabrini Green development, the University of Illinois at Chicago, and Sandburg Village. And interior scenes like the apartments, hospital, that opening story with Ted Raimi in it, were all shot on Los Angeles sound stages. There was some Cabrini Green involvement as well. Residents of Cabrini Green were involved during the Chicago shoot, including on-screen roles and logistical cooperation, contributing to the film's realism. From what I read, it was important for Bernard Rose. It was important to Bernard Rose that they not just be background characters in the shots that they were getting. He really wanted to incorporate people into the process. So I thought that was pretty cool, because they could have just brought in a bunch of actors and told everybody to get out of the shot and all of that. But instead, they kept it more on the realism side of things. And the other thing I wanted to mention about filming was bees.
Yeah, I had that in special effects, but we can talk about it now.
How do you feel about bees?
I'm better with them now than I used to be. I used to have a serious phobia of them when I was younger. Now I don't freak out quite as much, but it took me a while. They, scare me a lot.
Have you ever been stung by a bee?
Yes, but not many times.
What was your biggest bee sting memory?
It's funny. My sister and I both think this happened to us. So I remember walking up the stairs at my grandparents' house, up their back stairs, putting my hand down on the railing and being stung by something. I'm not sure if it was a bee or a hornet. It was in the base of my thumb. I can remember exactly where it happened. My sister swears she has the exact same memory. So I don't know. It might be one of us got stung by a bee on our grandparents' back stairs, but that's the most memorable. What about you?
It'll be exciting for when you die and you like see your life flash before your eyes, whether or not you actually got stung by the bee.
Yeah, I don't even argue with her about it anymore because I'm pretty sure it was me. But like, I don't know. Memory's a weird thing, man. Who knows? I mean, I know. It was me.
I believe I was only stung once. Like you, I have a pretty big phobia of stinging insects, which is problematic for where we live and really anywhere that you might live. During the summertime, there's going to be some stingers out and about. But when I was about maybe like, I would say 10 years old, I was playing basketball in a backyard in Brewer, Maine. And there was a bee's nest near the basketball hoop, if not like behind it or something. And one of my errant shots angered a bee. And it came at me and it landed behind my ear. It settled in that space behind my ear and stung me back there. So I was like trying to get it off and it was like fuzzy and stinging and it was not a pleasant experience. But nowadays we have our own stingy insect problems in our house.
We do.
This past summer, wasps, we believe.
I think they were wasps.
Keep getting in through around, I think, where the air conditioner is in our bedroom /office /podcast recording studio. And there must have been at least over the course of a few weeks, like 10 that got in here.
Yep.
But I did find a good method on the internet. If you're ever afraid of stinging things and one gets into your house, you get your vacuum cleaner. You take off the floor attachment on the hose, so you just got the tube, the exposed tube, and you work up some courage. You do some mantras like, buckle up, bee, baby, buckle up, baby. Sorry.
Perfect.
And you just go for it, but you just got to be confident, and because when you miss, which sometimes happens, it is terrifying. But usually you end up confusing them, and I have not yet been attacked in that process, but...
There's been a few times when I've come up and you're like, shh, the bee's sitting there. I'm waiting, because you would wait until it had been there for a while, because you don't want it to be, you know, eager and excited. Like, you wanted it to be tired, so you'd be like, I think it hasn't moved for a while.
Because they start to get sleepy at, like, dusk.
Exactly, so we would wait. So there was... It was an interesting summer. The vacuum's still up here, I think, the one that you would use for that. So,
well, yeah, you got to keep it close. I felt like I want to make it kind of like a proton pack from Ghostbusters.
I think you could probably market that. That sounds like a great idea.
Well, in this movie, there were nearly 200,000 live bees used. And as a lot of people probably know, Tony Todd had an agreement to receive $1,000 per sting, though a lot of the reports you see online seem to be much higher than what has been confirmed by his estate. You know, you see 23 stings or 27 stings, but the most reliable sources seem to say he was stung 3 times. Is that what you saw?
I saw 23, but I saw that in a few different sites.
I think I'd have to double check.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it was less than what the legend is. And the reason why it wasn't a ton of stings, even though he was really covered in them, is because they used newly hatched bees for the scenes when they were covering him up and they were in his mouth. And he had a mouthpiece to protect his mouth as well.
Yep.
But these newly hatched bees apparently are much less likely to sting.
Good to know.
They did have a bee wrangler, as you would imagine. They didn't send Tony Todd out into Chicago or Los Angeles. He's like convincing bees. He's like, hey, you want to be in a movie? This wrangler's name is Dr. Norman Gary. He's a UCLA entomologist, And he also supervised the B work on My Girl.
Oh, interesting.
So it's his fault that, well, we won't spoil My Girl. I've not seen it. It sounds too sad. Did you have other things on the Bs?
I didn't. I was just touching on them.
So this is where I had worked in the area on the novel versus screenplay comparison.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot for it. I had put it here with Clive Barker. Do you have some stuff about it?
I do, but since you read it, I'll let you take over. And if I have anything extra, I'll add it in.
Sure. This is a pretty quick read. I read very quickly, but I'd say you could read it in a few hours easily. It was published in 1985 in Volume 5 of Books of Blood. It includes The Hook-Handed Man, Castration, An Uncatchable Killer, Urban Brutality. A lot of Tony Todd's lines come directly from the book. That was really interesting. Bernard Rose really drew strongly on the character of the Candyman. And did you know that Clive Barker actually made a short film of it?
No.
It's a short, dark piece shot on 16 millimeter, printed in negative. It was one of his very early experimental films. I'm not sure if you can watch it anywhere, but I think it was much more in keeping.
Did they call him Candyman in the novel?
Yes, he's called the Candyman. It would, let's see. I have a couple of quotes from Clive Barker. He says, Candyman was Bernard Rose's baby from the beginning. His favorite story was The Forbidden because he wanted to deal with the social stuff. He liked the idea of taking a horror story with some social undertones and making a movie of it. We agreed that it needed to be relocated to the U.S. because it was American money and they weren't going to be interested in a story set in Liverpool, but the Cabrini Green setting, I think, worked perfectly well.
You could have incorporated the Beatles, though, if it was Liverpool.
That's true. Could have.
I wish I had a good Beatles impression.
I do too. Man, I really was hoping. But that's okay. You don't have to feel any pressure.
Ringo.
I do a pretty good British accent, but not regionally. Like, I couldn't do a Liverpool accent, so I'm not going to try. But I will let you keep trying. So Clive Barker was pretty involved. He was involved with kind of translating the story into this new American setting. I watched over the thing. I worked with him. I story conferenced with him. But at the end of the day, it's his movie. And I think he did a tremendous piece of work. So Clive Barker was really pleased with this adaptation. So it's really interesting how close the movie stays to the story, even though, we're going to talk about how big the racial themes in this movie, I think, are impossible to ignore. And yet it was not a part of the original story. The original story, however, was very focused on class. The main characters' names are the same. The design of the Candyman mural is a crucial part of the story. So the big mural where she kind of walks through his mouth, that is a focal point of the story. I am going to spoil the story here. It is really worth reading, so skip over to the next bookmark if you want to not hear this part. But Helen is studying graffiti, not folklore, but she's still studying. And the group in the story, the group of people who live in the council estate, are sinister and coordinated, and they actually are consciously sacrificing innocence to the Candyman. So Helen becomes a sacrifice to the Candyman, and they kind of are complicit in that, whereas in this movie, that is not the case. Helen takes on a very different role, and her relationship to and with the residents of Cabrini Green, very different. Again, it is a horror novel, or a horror novella, really, versus kind of a horror movie. So Helen dies in both. The baby does not survive in the book.
Jeez.
And yeah, the baby it's pretty brutal. And the major divider is class, not race and class. But in both the book and the film, Helen is an outsider. She's an intruder. I don't know why I said it that way.
An intruder from the outside.
An intruder from the outside. She only comes to understand the rules, the customs, and the dangers of these communities through victimhood and violence. So, we'll talk about Helen and her decisions, but that carries over in both the book and the movie. She is this outsider woman who is set apart from the people she is studying and is kind of using them for her own means, right? Wanting to move forward in academia. Trevor's a twat in both the book and the movie. Biggest difference, I think, in terms of characters is that the Candyman himself is not a Black former slave. Candyman is a jaundiced, yellow-skinned, hook-handed man who wears a patchwork coat and is covered in blood. He's in motley, like a jester. So he represents the other. In one of the other scenes, there's a pile of candy with razor blades in both the book and the movie. So that was another connector. So some really strong imagery. And once again, a lot of Tony Todd's monologues as Candyman were taken directly from the book, which was great because I couldn't write fast enough while we were taking notes. And so I was able to use the book to grab some of those lines. Really fascinating adaptation that works in a way that a lot of them don't. Like it transforms. They're both really good and they stand on their own. And not every adaptation does that. Sometimes it loses whatever it is. But Bernard Rose really did take inspiration from the story and create something new that stands on its own completely, but shares DNA, which, you know, given that we write songs about these movies and are kind of being inspired by this art to make our own art, I really admire that about this movie book combo and the 2021 requel or whatever, which you might be talking about that in a minute. But the remaking of this, which is really a sequel, it's in the same world, but
yeah, it's definitely a hard requel.
Yeah, it's a hard requel, but it actually, I think, continues this development really beautifully in a line from the original story to the 92 movie to the 21 movie. I know there's people who will fight me on this, but given what I love about movies and what I love about this movie, I think the book and the 21 requel both kind of act as really lovely bookends. So that's what I have to say about the story. I was a big fan. I'm really glad I read it.
Is he jaundiced because he ate so much candy?
I don't know.
Because that will mess up your liver, I think.
It will. It will.
If untreated, it could
or maybe
lead to that.
Maybe from eating people or their souls or whatever. The Candyman, again.
That's just protein.
In both, the Candyman talks about how Helen's creation of doubt leads to his needing to cause chaos and fear, which is fascinating. But that carries over despite some of the other changes. So yeah, I was a really fun one. I'm glad I squeezed it in before the episode.
All right, so now let's move on to cast and characters.
Yes. So much fun. So
performances.
Incredible performances. Helen Lyle, Virginia Madsen. Let's talk about Virginia Madsen, the actress, first. Did you know she was Michael Madsen's sister?
I did.
I didn't know that. Did you know that Michael Madsen never saw this movie?
That's upsetting. Is it because she's naked in it?
Yes, because he refuses to watch any movie in which she's naked. So that's the only reason why I know he never saw this movie.
I wonder about that sometimes. Like, and I know that I think I saw an interview with, oh my God, now that I've tried to think of the name, it's gone.
Come to you, but it was an actor of some sort.
Yeah. The woman she's been in a ton of stuff recently. She was in The Substance. She plays the younger Demi Moore. It's going to drive me nuts.
Oh, her mom, I can see her face, but since you're blocked, I'm blocked. I'll find it.
And really the first time I saw her she was in
Margaret Qualley?
Yes, thank you.
There it is. I didn't even have to look it up. I just had to start looking it up, and I remembered. Margaret Qualley.
She was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was the first time I saw her, but I saw her, she was doing an interview, I think maybe with Fallon, one of the late night hosts. I think it was Fallon. And she was talking about her dad telling all his friends about all these movies she was going to be in, and like every single one of them, like for like 3 movies in a row, she was going to be quite naked or sexualized some other way. And I always do wonder about that. And, it certainly depends on where you grew up and your upbringing and all of that. But it would definitely be weird to have. I can understand Michael Madsen's perspective. So
yeah, I think one of our kids, our younger child, was asking me the other day about like, when actors kiss, are they really kissing? That must be weird. Like if they're not actually together. And I was like, yes, it's an excellent observation.
And it's interesting with Virginia Madsen, going back to when I first saw this in high school, Obviously, she's playing a grad student. I'm assuming she's around that age, too, when she filmed this. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think she was probably about 25, 28.
I don't know if it was just the hairstyle or something, but to me, she seemed really old.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, and I was used to watching movies like Scream or whatever when, it was just a cast of young, hot people. And I didn't necessarily find Virginia Madsen that attractive when I watched it then. But I've definitely made a reassessment since then. I mean, obviously, she's a very attractive young starlet in this movie, and almost more of a classic look than some other movies. I mean, she's a standout in her performance.
Yeah, she did have, she had a lot of roles early in her career that kind of placed her within that trope. So she was in David Lynch's Dune in 1984. She was Princess Irulan. And then she also was in a 1986 movie called Fire with Fire, where she was again like the young starlet. She has talked a lot about some of the abuse that she suffered in Hollywood and how she kind of just wouldn't let it mess with her, but how, of course, that messes with your head. She got an Oscar nomination for her role in Sideways in 2004. And then she also co-founded a production company called Title IX Productions for independent films, supporting women particularly in film. I really, the little bit that I read about her kind of was like, oh, I'm a big fan of her perspective. She did take some time off when she had her child. She has a child with Antonio Sabato Jr., who I think he's probably in his 20s now. And
Antonio Sabato Jr.?
No, but he looks like it in the pictures. No, their child. I think his name's Max. I don't remember. And then, so yeah, she's had a really long career. Seems pretty stable head on her shoulders. It was revealed in a 2012 interview that originally Virginia Madsen was cast as Bernadette, and Alexandra Pig, the director's wife, was supposed to play Helen. The executives decided to cast a black actress in the role of Bernadette. Interesting. And then Pig got pregnant and recommended that Madsen take over. So she wasn't originally supposed to play Helen. Filmmakers also considered Sandra Bullock for the role, which I think would have been a very different movie. And I'm glad they picked Virginia Madsen. She has such a striking presence in this film.
I feel like this is if it's not the same year Speed came out, it's right around the same time.
Had to be close. Wasn't Speed mid 95, 96, maybe?
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and then The Net, too, is the other thing I remember Sandra Bullock from that time. So action-y movies, as opposed to this movie, requires some really... just some depth. She's so great. I loved her hair a lot. Let's move from Virginia to Helen, the character. Helen is persistent to the point of recklessness, a graduate student who's married to Trevor and best friends with Bernadette. She keeps ignoring perfectly good advice from everybody. They're like, don't go to this place where you really need a police escort. You look like a cop. Cut it out. And she's like, no. I need to take pictures. I need to go. Really pushing herself through.
Definitely that youthful foolhardiness that
yeah
often is the reason why young people are so successful at some of their endeavors that us older people might not take on in our later years.
High risk, high reward. If she had succeeded, she really wanted to write this thesis about urban legends and urban myths, and she found this opportunity to do something that nobody else had done yet. And she's motivated by wanting to show up not only her her shitty husband, Trevor, who doesn't take her seriously, who condescends to her and is clearly cheating on her from the beginning. In the book, she knows he's cheating, by the way. She just doesn't care. And that's never made clear in the movie whether she knows that he's cheating. Like, she rolls her eyes when she sees him talking to some of his students in the beginning when she comes into one of his lectures, but she doesn't act as though she thinks he's actually cheating on her. But he does stay out till all hours of the night. He's never around. He's the worst. But she also wants to show up Purcell, who's one of the other faculty people who's kind of being dismissive of her desire to chase down urban legends. And she's like, I gotta get him. Like, think about what the look on his face will be. Bernadette's like, we don't need to do this. And Helen says, we do need to do this. Like, think about Purcell. Think about the quest for something new. I, at one point in my life, was in graduate school, and I was finishing up a master's and was thinking I wanted to do a PhD. Actually, wanted to do some film studies and cultural studies and theology specifically. And I remember my advisor first of all, advising me not to. She said that you've got to really love this if you want this life. And then she said, imagine all of academic knowledge as like a circle or an arc. And then imagine your field of study as the teeniest, tiniest little bump on the edge of that arc, like pushing collective knowledge outward. But like that you have to do this super specific work in graduate work that almost nobody is ever going to pay attention to, that somebody might someday look at for, I don't know, a podcast or something. They might find your thesis and reference it. But that desire to kind of make your mark in academia, I think, is an incredibly strong driver. And this is what drives Helen, at least at first. Then she kind of gets pulled in and connected. There is a vague sense of connection that she is the reincarnation of Daniel Robitaille's lover, maybe. Her face is on the mural. It was always you, Helen, he says. So there's some sort of supernatural sense of fate. But at least for the first 45 minutes, she just wants to get her story. Very much like an intrepid reporter type of person. She is a complex protagonist. She's not entirely likable all the time, but she is redeemed in the end, which is different from the book. When the false Candyman attacks, this is such an interesting series of events. So Helen asks Jake, the young boy at Cabrini Green, to show her the bathroom where one of the Candyman's victims supposedly was killed. And she goes into the bathroom, and then she is surrounded by gang members, and then she is horribly beaten by the false Candyman. Once he's arrested, Helen assures Jake that Candyman isn't real, because Helen still doesn't believe in the Candyman at this point. She's like had a few weird visions. She saw the bees in the toilet, but she's still kind of like on this realm. And she tells Jake that Candyman isn't real. And Candyman cites that later. He's like, if you hadn't sowed doubt within my congregation, I wouldn't have had to come here and take a baby and start killing people to scare them. He feeds on their fear. And so Helen thinks that, you know, when Helen names the guy who assaulted her, the cop says, we knew he was the leader of the gang, but nobody would testify against him. And here comes Helen, the outsider, who comes in, is poking her nose where it doesn't belong, gets beat up, and then is able to get this guy off the streets. And she's the white savior who comes in and saves the poor people who weren't able to save themselves. And yet, by doing so, she actually has screwed them and herself over, because Candyman then takes the baby.
Yeah, because it was almost the existence of this false Candyman that was keeping everyone safe from the real Candyman, because they all believed in the myth.
Exactly. He was keeping the myth alive, and so Candyman didn't need to come and gut people, because there was this horrible sociopathic human who was doing that and keeping the people frightened and afraid. And so because Helen came in and did that, she then is actually the reason why he came back. Very, very complicated, right? This is not a simple narrative of like good guy, bad guy, or is she even a final girl? I'm not sure. Both Helen and Candyman are using the residents of Cabrini Green, Candyman to boost his legend, Helen to boost her reputation, right? Helen and Candyman are mirrors. Mirrors are obviously a big piece in this. Candyman strips Helen of her status by framing her for the murders, which leaves her isolated and crazy. So Helen is protected by her status as a white woman. She even calls it out, right? She's like, oh, they couldn't come and help until it was a white woman who was attacked. She points that out to Bernadette when she's at the police station identifying her attacker. But then Candyman takes away from her this privilege and this status by framing her for the murder, like leaving her covered in the dog's blood and taking the baby away. And takes away those layers. So all of her allies, the police officers and Trevor and everybody, they're all gone. When she is accused of killing Bernadette, she says, I'm not capable of that. No part of me is capable of that. Her sense of identity and who she is and herself is shattered over the course of the film purposefully by Candyman. And we watch her kind of crumble. She has kind of this sense of resignation when she's talking to the shrink about, you know, well, what have I done? I've been here for a month. What? Like crazy, right? Like she loses herself entirely in the myth, in the legend, and her sense of identity, which is what Candyman seduces her with and says, why would you want to be alive if you could be dead and be a legend, right? So really interesting. Helen's always climbing through windows and shit, I wrote. At the end, when she's climbing in through the door or the window, she's in the nurse's blue uniform. Made me kind of think of Alice in Wonderland, like through the looking glass. So I think there was some of that imagery as well. And then the last, Candyman says, all you have left is my desire for you. He takes everything from her except that desire, that sense of desire. So the other thing, and I don't know where this belongs, but it's that look that she has. You first see it on her face when she's listening to the story of Daniel Robitaille by Purcell at the dinner party, and she's kind of like, she starts to kind of look off vaguely and really incredibly close up shot of her face. And then later when Candyman is speaking to her throughout the film, you get this look on her face of just it's fear, it's ecstasy, it's
hypnotism,
wonder. And she was hypnotized. Yeah, that's where I was going with it. She was hypnotized because Bernard Rose didn't want kind of the typical screaming girl faced with the killer. He wanted something different, more intense. And oh my goodness, does it work? It is a part of what makes Helen's character so fascinating. She is afraid in certain point, like when she sees Bernadette's body, when she gets covered in blood. It's not that she doesn't respond emotionally, but to Candyman himself, she kind of freezes, which is just so interesting.
And those shots that you're talking about, and I do think the first one is when she's at the dinner with Purcell and Bernadette and Trevor. I was commenting to you that those shots really look like, it is like a almost a vintage Hollywood shot, that close up, and it's like there's a strip of light that kind of overlays her eyes. And then, like you said, that is like at the dinner, it's the first time she's kind of hypnotized by the lore. And then when she encounters Candyman in the future, we see those similar shots again and again to symbolize that sort of entrancement. Is entrancement a word?
Maybe. The meaning is clear. Entrancement. I'm not sure.
I'm gonna make a movie called Entrancement.
I think that Helen, it is something that gives this movie a richness and a depth. I almost want to say like it's syrupy, like, which is interesting because it's like sweet, right? But that Helen's kind of floating in and out of consciousness. Plus, she has all these flashes of pictures of his face. It's such a good job done by the director and the editing and all of that to kind of interweave these layers. Nothing is clear. Nothing is fixed. Everything is really messy and tough. And I don't think everybody likes that, which may be why this movie doesn't get as highly ranked. I think that it leaves you with questions. It's not neat and tidy. I love that, which is why I have such a high ranking for this film. High rating. I always switch those words. All right, so let's talk about Candyman, Helen's mirror, the antagonist of this movie. And let's talk about Tony Todd first, the actor, the character, the cast member before the character. Tony Todd, we talked about a couple weeks ago in Final Destination, but he's appeared in more than 100 films. Platoon in 1986, Night of the Living Dead in 1990, Candyman, The Crow in 94, The Rock in 96, Wishmaster 97, all the Final Destination movies in one form or another. He also was on and off Broadway, a lot of stage acting, won a lot of awards for that, and on television. He unfortunately passed away not long, about a year and a half ago in November of 24 from stomach cancer. He was married for 38 years to his wife, Fatima. And I thought that was really sweet. Also, I did not know he has a sister who's also in show business, Monique Dupree, also known as the true original Gata. She's known as the first Black Scream Queen. She's been in a bunch of indie horror, comic book, fetish, catalog modeling, in a band, pro wrestler, and a professional cosplayer. She's got 10 kids with her ex-husband, and she's currently married to former ECW star Tommy Dreamer. I went on a bit of a rabbit hole on Tony Todd's sister, but cool family. We know that a lot of families have the music, acting, artist bug. I know our family is certainly that as well. So I did not know those things about Tony Todd. We could talk a lot about him and his career. He was 6'5", and his physical characteristics were really important for this movie. He is tall and strong, handsome, striking. His deep voice defines this movie. I don't think without Tony Todd, this movie would have hit as hard, which is why it's funny to think that Eddie Murphy was actually considered for the title character at one point. Eddie Murphy would have been a really different Candyman.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, unbelievably so. I did see on Bloody Disgusting that Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen came up with the origin story for Daniel Robitaille, which I saw no other citation, so I don't know if this comes from, extras on the Blu-ray extras or something, but I thought that was really interesting. They took fencing and dancing lessons together to build a romantic connection. They worked really hard to connect on screen, and man, did it ever pay off. Their chemistry is something else.
Yeah.
Robitaille as Dracula. There is a sense that Candyman is kind of a bit of a Dracula character, so very seductive. And it's funny because I just watched the original 1931 Dracula a few weeks ago, and I was like, yes, that totally vibes that like really deep, striking, dangerous, but seductive connection. Opening monologue, so spooky. I wrote many of his lines, as I said, do come from the short story. The story of Candyman is that the story that's told by Purcell is that in 1890, the son of a slave, his father made a device for mass production of shoes. I thought that was interesting only because a former slave then creates a machine that means that the former slaves don't have employment anymore because they can't produce those shoes, right? So even his father was kind of a part. This movie delves deeply into systemic racism against Black people in the United States and in their history. So his origin as the son of a slave is really important for this. However, I want to ask you a question about Candyman, and that I didn't think about till I started going down some of these rabbit holes. And this is actually the first show I think I'm going to be putting, there's a number of notes in the show notes. So there's a lot of good work done on this movie in particular, done by people who know a lot more about the Black experience in the U.S. and about Black horror and cinema history. So I've done my best here, but if you would like to know more about this, please check out the show notes and read some of these incredible papers, essays, etc. But one of the questions that I found was whether Candyman is the ghost of Daniel Robitaille, or is he, and I believe the second one, the spirit of the murder and the hate that came with it. Because Daniel Robitaille was killed by a lynch mob. He was lynched, right? That this is a really ugly chapter of American history, that this happened to many Black men, and then for the sin of falling in love with a white woman, he was murdered horribly, had his hand cut off and honey poured on him. And that, gives us the classic vision that we have of Robitaille or of Candyman with the hook for a hand. But like, is he a vengeful ghost? Or I like the argument that he is actually a manifestation of his own lynching, the spirit of murder and hate, which makes sense here. Candyman feeds on the fear and belief of the people of Cabrini Green, and doubt is what calls him into the world. So Helen's doubt calls him into the world. When the agent of oppression, when the false Candyman, the gang leader, is gone, Candyman, the spirit, has to come into the world and re-spark their fear. He targeted the McCoy family, Anne-Marie, and took the baby, Anthony. Anne-Marie was like, my baby's not going to get caught by gangs. He's not going to get caught by drugs. The baby represents the ability of someone to get out of poverty, to get out of Cabrini Green. And Candyman specifically targets that family. He targets the hope of the poor people in Cabrini Green. He targets their hope and takes it away in order to inspire fear, to keep them stuck there, right? Like kind of like Pennywise, he feeds on fear. So I think Candyman is kind of the spirit of hatred and oppression, makes more sense to me than Candyman as the ghost of Daniel Robitaille.
I thought you said you were asking me a question.
I was. What do you think?
For so long.
I'm sorry, I'm so excited. But like, do you think he's a ghost, or do you buy? I wanted to tell you what like the alternative was. What do you think about that argument that he's not a ghost specifically as an vengeful spirit, but that he is instead the spirit of hatred and oppression personified?
I mean, I agree. I think it's more the second, the latter. And the question is, and I'm not sure if your reasoning included this or not, but I feel like he took over when he was killed, Daniel Robitaille.
Yeah.
Like that, it's almost like not the vengeful spirit, but the spirit that you're talking about, however you eloquently put it.
The spirit of hatred and oppression.
Yeah, like that existed.
Yes.
Prior to his death, and it was like his turn when he died, and now he's bringing in someone else to have a turn.
Yeah, I think so, which again puts this in conversation with the 2021 requel in a way that I'm not going to go further on it here, but I do think that if this is an idea that interests somebody, that watching this movie and then watching the 2021 movie and having this question in mind would be really fun. That's what I've been doing this week while I've been researching this in bits and pieces. Anything else on Candyman? Or I can kind of go through the rest of the characters. No one as rich as Helen and Candyman, but we do have a few more characters that show up.
Except that we don't really know why he's called Candyman. Obviously, there's sweets to the sweet, but there's nothing in the lore about that exactly, except for the honey that they use to get the bees to cover him and sting him to death.
The honey and the candy with razor blades that she finds.
Right.
Well, this is a link. It's a tenuous link, perhaps, but candy with razor blades was a common urban legend in the 80s and 90s. And so because Candyman, the spirit, is something that lives on in urban legend and in these stories, and there's the hook for a hand coming through a mirror, like all of these stories that just kind of live in the ether, just like the candy with razor blades in it, that also somehow connects it, I think. And I think Candyman Sweets to the Sweet is from Hamlet originally, and before that from the Bible. So I think there's something, I don't know. You're right. We never really nail down why he's called Candyman. But it also feels like an urban legend. It feels like something that is true and should be provable, but isn't. Maybe? Yeah, would love other people's take. This movie is messy, so tell me how you think I'm wrong. I am not married to my opinion.
I'm just saying before the dog barked over me, let us know in the comments if you have a better idea why he's called Candyman.
All right, let's talk about Trevor. Fuck Trevor. That is all. No, that's not all, but it's mostly what I have to say. Played by Xander Berkeley. Xander Berkeley, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, Air Force One, Apollo 13.
He was a dad in Terminator 2.
Yeah. He went to Hampshire College, which it definitely a place with lots of artists and free thinkers and things like that. He studied acting at Hampshire College, which was interesting. Also, I would murder somebody who woke me up the way he wakes his wife up from a dead sleep. I would not have put up with that, let alone all the other stuff he did. He's condescending. He's a liar. He is a terrible communicator. He seems significantly older than her to me. He's a professor and she's a grad student, which to me implies that she might have been his student before he became her husband, which means very, very creepy, very, very. And then as soon as she goes to the mental hospital, he moves in his hot girly pop who then repaints their whole apartment a hideous shade of pink. Trevor is the worst.
It was like drunk tank pink.
Oh, it was so bad.
Which is supposed to be calming. Yes. He's definitely aside from Candyman and the other murderers in this movie, he's our evilest regular character.
Yeah, just gross.
But he's also not the worst of all mankind either. He's just a regular, average bad person with making bad person mistakes and right not treating people the way he should.
Yeah, what a jerk. That's okay though. He gets his. We've got Bernadette Walsh, played by either Casey or Cassie Lemons. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I was saying Casey, but then you said Cassie. You might be right. She also played Ardella Mapp in Silence of the Lambs in 1991.
Yes.
And had many TV credits both before and after these movies, like she was in Murder, She Wrote.
My favorite.
I know. That's why I mentioned it.
Filmed in California. You can tell by the beach.
Uh-huh.
Listen to our previous episode for that info.
She became a director, and she has directed some pretty cool big movies. She also directed one episode of Luke Cage, which is a show I really enjoyed, and the movie Harriet in 2019, which was a Harriet Tubman biopic starring Cynthia Erivo and Janelle Monáe. So she became a director. Bernadette, I think, as a character, is one of the only truly good people. I think Anne-Marie is also a good person for the most part. She's not, I think Anne-Marie is probably another good person. But Bernadette is really kind of purely just, she's a really good friend. She tries to tell Helen to stop doing stupid shit. But when Helen does the stupid shit, she goes with her anyway, right? She goes into this creepy old apartment where a murder happened. And then of course she dies horribly, and Helen is framed for her murder. So yeah, Bernadette, top-notch character. And the fact that she is Black, again, as we heard earlier, was a purposeful decision by the executives. So it places her, she's in the upper class, right? If this is separated by race and class, she is with all of the snooty college people, but she also has an understanding more deeply than Helen of exactly what they're heading into and what it means. So I think that she's a really interesting character, and I like her a lot.
Yeah, no, she's everything you described.
Yeah.
She's just there and does all the things that you would want a good friend to do. You need that good friend to tell you when you're doing something dumb, but back you up when you decide to do it anyway.
Yeah, and too bad she got killed for it, but, it's not like a happy movie. We've got Anne-Marie McCoy, played by Vanessa Williams. Let's talk about Vanessa Williams, not the singer Vanessa Williams, in case you thought it might be. It is not. There's two of them. She also plays Anne-Marie later in the requel. She has lots of TV credits. She was also in the DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince music video for Parents Just Don't Understand.
And they don't.
No, they do not. And she played the first and only Black main character in Melrose Place in 1992 on the TV show Melrose Place. So she's got a very long and active career as well. Anne-Marie, the character, she wants to keep her child away from the gangs. He represents the future, the hope of escaping the projects. She is one of the only two residents of Cabrini Green who welcomes Helen in. And then for her trouble, her child is kidnapped. Anne-Marie is a character from the book, although, of course, in the book, she is not Black. But the Anne-Marie in the book also welcomes Helen and kind of shows her courtesy and then is repaid poorly for her trouble. Anne-Marie is also the one who comes to Helen's funeral at the end. She leads the entourage of people through, along with Jake. And she recognizes that Helen saved her child and kind of broke the cycle, which means Helen does become a legend and a myth, but not as a murderer like Candyman wanted her to, but as a savior instead, which is kind of lovely. And I thought Anne-Marie is wearing gloves in the last scene, and it reminded me of Helen wearing gloves earlier in the movie when she was first coming to Cabrini Green. I thought there was a little bit of mirroring, a little bit visually anyway, with Anne-Marie and Helen. But yeah, I noticed that too.
So, I mean, and I get that part, that Helen has become sort of a savior legend, but also she's not, though, right? Unless this is one of those areas that gets a little bit confusing because she definitely kills Trevor.
Oh, 100%. She becomes because she lost her life she was sacrificed the way Daniel Robitaille was, right, to the spirit of violence and oppression. So she becomes the next Candyman, or kind of carries that on. But to the people of Cabrini Green, Helen, the woman, I think this works if you see Candyman not as a ghost, but as like the carrying on of that spirit of hate and oppression. I don't know, actually.
So then does the spirit of hate and oppression move to white women?
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, I think that's in there because we all hate Trevor so much and we really want to see him and we want to have that shock value with burned Helen at the end. I'm actually not sure if that works within the spiritual setup that we've had. But there's a mural of her as an angel on the wall in Cabrini Green that we kind of close out with, right? So the woman is seen as kind of as a savior, and her story is told in the community as a positive one. Danny Robitaille's story was also told in the community because there was also a mural of him, right? Of his murder and his ending. And then there's mural of her ending because he was a victim of that oppression and rage. And I guess so was Helen. But then it doesn't, I don't know. Her killing Trevor, I'd have to work on that a little bit more. But a few more. We've got Jake, played by Dewan Guy. He was almost cast in Boys in the Hood, but the studio thought an 8-year-old was too young. So he was not in that, but he was in a series of movies over the course of his life, especially as a child. Little Giants, Cherokee Kid, multiple TV roles. He had some of the best lines, I thought, in the movie. I ain't scared of nobody, but you're crazy walking around here on your own. Like that deadpan delivery. He did a great job for tiny kid, man.
How old was he when he filmed this? Do you know?
Between 8 and 10, I think. Yeah, he was young. And then he also has a line that in the book is in the mouth of is another housewife resident of the project or of the council housing. They found it floating in the toilet. Can't fix that. Better off dead.
Yeah.
It was great deadpan delivery of that line. Jake helps Helen, but then he doesn't help her later, right? Like, and when he sees Helen going into the pile of wood at the end, he thinks she's Candyman because she has the hook and he just sees the hook. So Jake's another really interesting character in terms of what he does and how, like, it is through him and Anne-Marie that Helen has a relationship with the residents of Cabrini Green and those who are the true victims of the Candyman. And so really interesting role to make that decision to have it be a child in that way. We've got Dr. Burke, played by Stanley DeSantis. I couldn't figure out what I knew him from, and it turns out he was in so much stuff. But he died in 2005. He was in Rush Hour, I Am Sam, and The Aviator, all late 90s, early 2000s. So I think he was just one of those faces. I'm sure you're going to talk more about his death shortly. And then Stacy. Dude, fuck Stacy. She was the worst also. Played by Carolyn Lowry. Yeah, painted Helen's apartment. I was really upset about that. Also, I was wondering, is it implied that she gets framed for Trevor's murder in the end because she walks in there with a knife and he's gutted? Do you think that that's implied at all, or is that just...
Well, I have theories I want to talk about after Murder Mayhem.
Cool.
And that we can touch back on that.
Great, perfect. That's all I've got for casting characters for the most part.
All right. Let's dive into Murder Mayhem. I did those effects by myself with my mouth.
Practical effects, that's what we do.
Not unlike Psycho, the kill count is fairly small in comparison to some of the other films we tackle, but as you mentioned, and as is obvious to the audience, they're brutal killings that we see on screen. It all starts out with the story by, is it Helen that's listening to the story in the
Yeah.
opening? Not Bernadette, right?
No, it's Helen.
And she's being told as, an urban legend by a student that she's taken notes for her thesis about a man who goes to visit his girlfriend, and they get into the old hoopla of the Candyman scenario. The girlfriend leaves the bathroom after saying it 4 times. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
And Ted Raimi's character sticks around for that 5th and final Candyman pronouncement, and unfortunately he learns why he shouldn't do that, and the blood comes through the floor. And it's interesting because for most of these kills you don't see the kill on screen, you just see the brutality afterwards, the aftermath. So then we learn about Ruthie Jean, who really sparks sort of the contemporary legend, right, of Candyman.
Yeah.
And Helen sort of hears about it, but then she's looking on the microfilm and confirms that this murder truly did happen in Cabrini Green. Ruthie Jean was a woman, a resident of Cabrini Green, who was murdered in the bathroom. And that's where we kind of learn how Helen's apartment was also built the same way, was also intended to be government housing. And because of its location, it ended up not being that. So it was, kind of a spiced up version of Cabrini Green, or a fancied up version of it.
But, a gentrified version of it.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. And she shows Bernadette in her own bathroom, Helen does, that there's nothing between the medicine cabinets in the bathroom, that they're back to back. And so, Ruthie Jean's murderer basically came in through the bathroom, through that hole, and killed her. And really, this is what gets Helen involved in this deep investigation. Do we think that it was the real Candyman, or was it the fake Candyman who committed that murder? Do we not really know?
I'm not sure we ever find out. Would this be a good time to talk about the real life murder?
Sure.
So this is based on a true story. This is part of the genesis of the film. Ruthie Jean's death was based on the true story of Ruthie Mae McCoy, who was murdered in the mid-'80s, described in a 1987 article that I will have in the show notes. And actually, after the article first ran in 87, a few months later, the writer of the article got a call from John Malkovich, who met with him in a bar to discuss it, proposed it would make a good movie, that the lead character would be a white reporter investigating a medicine cabinet killing. And the author of the article was like, no, this is about Black communities. So what happened is that the woman called the police and said, someone is coming in through my bathroom mirror. And the police didn't believe her because she was in the projects, because she was Black, because she had a history of mental illness. And they actually did come in through her bathroom mirror and murdered her, shot her, and they didn't find her for days. And so the article about this was trying to expose the way that Black people couldn't depend on the authorities to come to them. And Malkovich said that movies whose dominant roles are Black usually didn't get funded, so the protagonist had to be white, and said this to him. It's generally believed, I found this in a few places, that Malkovich passed the story on to Bernard Rose, but he didn't have any official production role in the 92 movie. So that murder it was inspired by a real life murder, that killing.
I knew there was a real life murder. The John Malkovich, I have questions about that, but there's no way to confirm everything.
I know.
So the real life person who died, what was her name? Ruthie what?
It was Ruthie Mae McCoy.
But Clive Barker wrote his story in 85.
Yes.
And is Anne Marie's name Anne Marie McCoy in the story?
I know it's Anne Marie.
Maybe they added the McCoy later as a tribute.
I can check on that. That's a really good question. I knew that it was Anne Marie, but I didn't.
Because that would be a heck of a coincidence.
Kind of super creepy, actually. Let's see if she introduces herself as Anne Marie. I'll look that up. You can keep talking about that, and I'll find out the Anne Marie thing.
Well, the next sort of murder that we see, which is, again, another story being told, is Jake's story, where he, like you had mentioned earlier, he took Helen to the public bathroom and explained there was this child who had gone to the grocery store across the street with his mother. He really had to go to the bathroom. She sent him across the street to this public restroom. I guess the grocery store didn't have a restroom that they could use. Not good things happened to that child.
Really bad things.
So that's what leads to Helen's initial mayhem. She goes in to investigate. Gorgeous bathroom. Love it. Very clean. I'm being sarcastic. It's really bad.
So gross.
And
just Anne Marie, by the way.
Just Anne Marie.
Not McCoy. Okay. They added in McCoy, which is such an interesting choice.
Well, it's to tribute
to the woman who died and was not saved by the police. Yeah. Stinky ass bathroom?
Yeah, with a toilet full of bees. Right? That's where she sees the bee toilet?
Yes. With the arrow pointing down.
Yeah, I would hate that. There's not a vacuum cleaner big enough to clear that bee mess. And it's at that time that our alternate Candyman strolls in with his lackeys, and they proceed to beat Helen unconscious. It's at that time she starts seeing flashes, right?
Yeah, she starts seeing, she may have seen a flash of the Candyman mural before, the one with the door in the mouth. I think that showed up the same day that she saw it, and that's part of what drew her back. But I think she starts seeing them more frequently, like her connection to reality. Yeah,
because she was on her own because her film had run out of camera.
Sure had.
That's going to really confuse the young listeners that don't know how cameras work. Her camera had run out of film when she was there with Bernadette, and then she had gone back on her own to capture photos of what she had seen and was unable to film. And that's when she went on her little field trip with awesome little Jake there. We get a lot of great scenes, and I wanted to include some of that in Murder Mayhem, of Helen's encounters with Candyman. Even though there's no death involved, they're really just phenomenal scenes. I didn't know about all the stuff they had done to, benefit their chemistry, but that makes a lot of sense. And the first time is in the parking garage.
Such a cool scene.
Where's that, the parking garage at?
It's the parking garage, I think, after she goes to maybe it's at the school. Doesn't she meet with Bernadette in that like quad looking place? And then Bernadette leaves her and she goes to the parking garage.
Right. And Bernadette gives her the slides from her from her camera.
Yes.
That her camera, I guess, had been broken when she was attacked in the bathroom. But the negatives were salvageable, and Bernadette had created slides for her. So Helen's walking to her car and sort of looking through her slides. I said to Rachel, I was like,
yeah,
that's like the old-fashioned version of somebody walking along and staring at their phone instead of paying attention to where they're going. And of course,
100%.
This is about 45 minutes in or so, and this is where we're introduced to the real-life Candyman. She gets hypnotized, and all of a sudden, she awakes on the floor of Anne-Marie's apartment, covered in blood, holding a cleaver.
Yep.
She's in Anne-Marie's bathroom. She gets up and discovers right outside the door that Anne-Marie's dog has been decapitated. There is blood all over the place, and Anne-Marie is screaming bloody murder because she's discovered not only this horrific scene, but her baby is missing. I don't know how I would react in that situation. Obviously, not finding your child killed would be a plus.
Right, but with all that blood and you don't know if any of it belongs to the baby, just awful.
So this understandably leads to Anne-Marie tackling Helen.
Yep, right decision.
And then defending herself because she's woken up in this crazy situation. She gives a hack at Anne-Marie, right? With the cleaver.
Yeah, with the cleaver right in her upper arm.
And so Anne-Marie falls off her, and the police enter just as Helen is on top of Anne-Marie, holding the cleaver in this blood-drenched apartment. So she gets arrested.
Shocker. And reminding me of Alex in Final Destination.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good comparison. Another movie where our protagonist is hindered by being in the wrong place at the wrong time a lot of the time.
Yeah, like when he takes the knife out of his teacher and you're like, don't touch that. Come on. But I think Helen in this situation is less to blame than Alex is in his situation, because Alex knew he was already under suspicion and Helen has no idea what is happening.
Alex was like, let me make this look like I did all this. Let me just do some footprints in the blood. What else can I put my fingerprints on? But so Helen gets taken to a psychiatric facility. Oh, wait a minute. When did Bernadette?
So she doesn't get taken to the psychiatric hospital after she gets out of jail.
Yes.
Because they don't have any evidence to keep her. She gets taken home.
Yes. Sorry. So after they walk in, the police, and they see Helen with the cleaver, she gets arrested, but eventually she gets busted out of jail. Not as soon as she hoped, because she calls Trevor Deer at 3 a.m. And of course, he's not there. He's off gallivanting with his students.
Yo, fuck Trevor.
He springs her the next morning. And there's a large crowd of people who have questions for her outside.
This is the dismantling of her identity because her status and her reputation are everything. And this is where Candyman starts to unravel that.
And you can see, in the following scene, she's talking to her defense attorney and Trevor in the apartment. And you can very much tell that they have doubts about the situation. And I mean, who wouldn't, to be honest?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Who else could have done this other than a hook-handed legend from the depths of the darkness? So the next scene, we see Helen again interacting with Candyman, but in her own apartment, right? She's
so scary.
Yeah, and that's pretty great. That's when he starts sort of transporting everywhere that she's going. She tries to run out. He's out in the hallway. She goes back in. She's trying to call for help on the phone, but he's there. She grabs the knife, and we see poor Bernadette walking up the hall with the flowers. She wants to see her friend who's been going through this troubling time. And Helen's basically yelling to her, "Don't come in."
Right, but she can't speak because he put his hook into the side of her neck, and so she can't. So she's trying. Bernadette's the best supporter of her, doesn't doubt her at all, and man.
And basically, Bernadette comes in, and again, she's killed off screen. But we see the aftermath, and Helen's in the kitchen freaking out, and Trevor walks in to discover this awful scene. And then this is what leads to her being institutionalized. The next encounter with Candyman, between Helen and Candyman, is she's strapped down to this very comfortable looking steel table in an empty observation room.
So comfy.
And he's floating above her, Candyman is, and she's freaking out. And of course, we later see the footage of this, and what the doctor's perspectives would have been is her just freaking out at nothing. He does not appear to them in the video.
There's so much that's scary about this movie in terms of just Candyman being inevitable, but also the thought of losing control of your own mind, the fear of being falsely accused for a crime for which you can't give any evidence, and then you are put into, I think I mentioned something when we were watching it, what a nightmare to be put into a mental institution and pumped full of drugs for something that you didn't do and you have no way of getting out is somehow to me almost scarier than being locked in a room somewhere, right? Because your own mind, there's nothing you can do and other people are keeping you there. Oh, yeah, that freaks me out a lot.
Yeah, and so the next scene, we don't know that there's been really any significant passage of time, and clearly Helen doesn't either. She's brought into Dr. Burke's office, and that's when we learn that she's been there almost a month, pumped up with Thorazine, did they say?
Yeah, that's some heavy drugs.
That's what they were supposed to give Michael Myers in Halloween, but I guess they didn't or something. He got loose. But it worked on Helen, real good
Real good.
She says to the doctor, "Hey, you don't believe me? I can make this happen. Do you want to see Candyman?" And of course, she looks into the nearby mirror, sings her little Candyman song, and you think at first maybe they give a couple of extra beats, which is a nice touch for the suspense, because we all expect Candyman to come, and of course he does come. But for a minute there, you think, oh, maybe Helen really is losing her mind. I mean, at this point, I think she is losing her mind. I mean, how could you not? But not in the way that she's being accused of.
Right, exactly.
All of a sudden, Dr. Burke starts reacting to the hook that has been so gently inserted into his back by the Candyman and brutally murdered. That's the scene, from my understanding, that is much gorier in the UK version than the American version. I guess there's a lot more cuts to Helen's reaction in the US version, where in the UK version, we really see Burke getting the hook, as they say in showbiz.
They sure do. That's what they mean.
Wouldn't that be crazy if that's what they meant in show business? Yeah, give him the hook.
That would make stand-up comedy even more stressful and intimidating.
Yeah. Well, that's my time. And I always really like Candyman's exit from the scene as well, where he just flies out backwards through the window, which obviously gives Helen her opportunity for escape. She climbs through that window that he broke out through, climbs across the windowsill, which I've not yet had the opportunity to do that in my life, but I look forward to it. You know, escaping via windowsill to another room where people are confused why I'm coming in.
You will look for next time we have to go somewhere and need a hotel. I'll try to find somewhere that has that kind of setup for you.
Most places you can't get out the window. You need like a Candyman to fly out backwards through the glass.
Well, I'll work on that too then.
This is the first time that I had noted in my notes that we actually see Helen hurt someone intentionally. Maybe not as much as she intended, but she knocks the nurse out
right
in that room and steals her nurse's gown to escape from the institution, which it's an understandable act. I'm not saying that Helen's bad for it, but it is sort of an escalation from her character. Is that fair?
Yeah, and especially since when she was accused of killing Bernadette, she says, I'm not capable of that. That's not in me to do that. And yet here she is being pushed and pushed and pushed further and further until she can do something like that. That's a good observation.
But it is more an act of self-preservation than malice. So that, and then of course, you know, Murder Mayhem, we're not trying to hit every plot point, but it is notable that is where she goes back to her place and discovers Stacy girl painting up the apartment.
I feel like that could have been Mayhem if Helen had less self-control.
I mean, it was Mayhem. The fear that Stacy portrays, even though I don't like the character for all the reasons, right?
Right.
Her reaction to seeing Helen, I think, is really awesome.
Totally legit. I mean, she freezes, right? She becomes a Barbara in that moment for sure. But also understandable. Again, if you look at this from everybody's perspective but Helen's, this woman went crazy, kidnapped a baby, killed a dog, now has broken out of the insane asylum where she's been for a month and shown up. Yeah, I feel like that's a legit reaction.
And of course, she thinks that she's a murderer.
Right.
Is that so? Helen leaves that situation without causing too much trouble. Is that where she then goes back to Cabrini Green and finds Candyman sleeping on his own slab?
Yes, I think so.
What happens after that? I mean,
she finds him. They have like that really intense scene where he puts his hook under her skirt. Or no, that was earlier. That was earlier when he was trying to seduce her. And then, no, she goes and she like hits him with the hook. And then there's the bees, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then he puts her to sleep. And then she sees herself. It was always you, Helen. There's that.
When she wakes up.
Right, when she wakes up.
And then that's kind of leads to the conclusion of the film.
She hears the baby crying.
She hears the baby crying. The baby is in the pile of wood for the community's bonfire that was mentioned earlier. Hell of a bonfire pile.
Really big.
And it makes me think that's how we should be doing our spring cleaning. We just pile everything up in the backyard. We can invite neighbors to pile up their stuff too, and we just light it ablaze.
Love it. I hear the local fire chief is not a big fan of things like that, but we could find a way around it.
Maybe we could do it like at the school or something. Like in the field. Like the playground.
Community bonfire?
We did bonfires in high school.
That might be cool.
Like ones that the school did, not...
That's Wicker Man vibes, man.
Yeah.
Which the original story, The Forbidden, does the Helen and the baby and Candyman are all burned in the bonfire in the middle of the green. And in the book, Helen can see through the bars. The baby's corpse is there. The baby is murdered. The baby is not kidnapped. And she's in there with the baby's corpse and Candyman holding her. And she can see Trevor wandering around through the residence asking about her. And they all lie to him because they're complicit in this. So but yeah, Wicker Man, which is like a sacrifice, ancient sacrifices. Again, this is another like touch point on the myths and lots of mayhem though. Very fiery.
Yes. So, and like you had said, Jake sees her going in. I guess I didn't pick up on the fact that he saw just the hook. I thought he took her coming as the coming of Candyman in a way, like knowing that she has like led him there. But I think
I think he just saw the hook that she had as it like went in is what I saw.
That makes more sense. That it makes it less confusing. So I'm going to go with that. She goes in to save the baby, but Jake and his friends come start the bonfire with the intention of killing Candyman, and they succeed because Candyman is drawn in by Helen. I mean, I'm not sure that you can really kill him, but in this sense,
I think his plan was for him and Helen to die and the baby, that all three of them would die in the bonfire, and that would solidify his myth in the mind of his people, because they might not even find Helen's body. She would just be that crazy lady who escaped, right?
Yeah, but he's already dead. That's another part that kind of confuses me. How do you kill a dead person again?
I don't think that right. Well, because I don't think that he is dead. I don't get the impression that Candyman is dead and gone. I think that he dies because Helen saves the baby, because she turns what is supposed to be a tragedy that will keep people oppressed and stuck into, like, she saves the baby who was going to get out of the projects, right? She saves the hope of the community. And so that's what kills Candyman, not the fire, because he physically can't die, because all the bees go up and they light up. And like, I think that the spirit itself is killed or ended, destroyed, because Helen breaks the cycle of violence.
And this is the one place where you can see that it is not, it is clearly a stunt person with a wig on.
Yes.
Crawling out of that fire, which is fine. That happens sometimes. And when you're dealing with real fire and stuff back then, I'll take the real fire over CGI fire and having the real actress in CGI fire any day. So I'm not really complaining. I'm just pointing out it's very noticeable.
Yes.
Helen dies, saving the baby. She's all burnt up. Then we go to our denouement, where we see poor Trevor, getting his comeuppance finally.
Begging for it because he knows he deserves it.
And, I mean, he's clearly mourning Helen's loss after the funeral, where all the residents of Cabrini Green have shown up to pay tribute. He's back in his bathroom, and he's looking into the mirror and recites Helen's name 5 times, and upon his consent through that action, Helen appears and gives him his, with Stacy screaming in the kitchen with a knife.
And maybe her spirit is not the same spirit of the Candyman, of vengeance and hate. It's not like hatred and oppression. Maybe she has become the legend of the vengeful wife. Maybe that's it. Maybe she's a different spirit.
Well, my theory is that Trevor just makes women very angry. And he created a murderer out of Helen.
Yes.
And then he created a murderer out of Stacy, who murdered him in the bathroom.
Oh, I like that.
I'm obviously kind of joking, but I have heard fan theories that Helen may actually just be losing her mind and is a murderer.
I thought this was probably a nice place to talk about that. I wasn't sure if we should. I think this murder mayhem section is a good place to talk about that. Yeah, that Helen, that there is no Candyman, that Helen does go crazy, and that what everybody believes is what actually happened.
We don't have to dwell on it too long. It's an interesting thought. I like kind of those kinds of things and thinking about that as I watch it. I think you're right that there are a couple of aspects of what we see. If we're supposed to trust what we're seeing 100%, like if what the filmmakers are showing us is what's happening, then that can't be completely true. And I don't mean her seeing Candyman, like that could be some sort of psychosis, right? And the fact that you don't see the kills on screen until Dr. Burke, up until that point, I think that theory could be true. But if we're supposed to believe what we're seeing on screen, then Dr. Burke's murder puts a wrench in that theory. And also, like you were saying, you know, if she really is locked up for a month, the baby has survived this whole time. up in the attic of Cabrini Green or whatever.
Right. Like, there's no way that baby survived if Helen actually did kidnap him that whole time. If she was only there for a night, then he could have. I think that the baby could have survived a couple of days without being taken care of. But I think that, yeah, I think we're supposed to wonder a little bit, but I think the movie's very clear about that this is not just Helen imagining a reason for murder. But I think you're right. It is an interesting thought.
And playing off that theory, I was also wondering, what if Candyman, because he is a legend, but he's real. Let's imagine that he is real, as the movie tells us. What if he has to act through another person? And in that sense, Helen is the murderer, and that's why she often does not see what she's done. She's in this hypnotized state and is then acting as the hand of Candyman. But then you have to imagine that the Dr. Burke killing, as portrayed to us as the film audience, is not really what happened. That she, in fact, but she gets out of those restraints somehow, and we see Candyman let her out. So again, that puts a wrench in that theory. But it's interesting to think about, and definitely adds another layer. And the fact that we can think about that even after seeing everything that happens on screen makes it much more believable that everybody in the whole wide world would think that she's responsible for all these killings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. It makes sense in the fiction of the world.
But that's all I have for Murder Mayhem.
Great.
So
let me hit on a couple of the themes. This could go on really long, but I'm not going to let it. I'm just going to touch on it. And once again, encourage you to head to the show notes section of this episode if you would like to go deeper into this, because I only scratched the surface of some of this stuff. This is what, if you know me at all, through these last 30, this is our 32nd episode. So after 32 episodes, you may have figured out that I really like exploring the ways in which horror movies answer the questions that we humans want to have answered. And I think that's what elevates this movie for me to such a high score, perhaps compared to, well, most people, I think. But this is one of my favorites and has been confirmed. Part of this is because of the themes that it deals with. We've talked a lot about this, but urban legends and myths is kind of the first one. This is what the original story was inspired by, were urban legends and myths of Liverpool, which has a surprising number of its own urban legends and myths. One of the other things that Roger Ebert said in his review was that urban legends tap our deepest fears, and one of the most subterranean involves the call for help that is laughed at or ignored, which I think is something that happens in this movie. We've got Bloody Mary and mirror rituals that are tapped into, right? The Candyman myth of saying his name into the mirror echoes the Bloody Mary myth that so many of us probably grew up with. I think kids still do that.
I meant to ask you about in the novel, the novella.
Yes.
How many times do they have to say Candyman for him to appear?
It's not in the novella.
Because I remember hearing, and it didn't come up in my research this time, but I have heard either in another podcast or YouTube video or in an article or something somewhere along the way that originally they were supposed to say it 13 times.
Jeez.
Which would, if you can imagine that.
Would take a long time.
Yeah, would be anticlimactic.
Yeah, too much. I don't think the name thing is actually at all. I think that's something that was introduced to the film version of the story. We've got the Hook Man, the bloody hook murderer, the escaped mental patient who preys on unsuspecting teenage couples.
And we might talk about this in our encore.
Yes, exactly. And then also maniacs hiding razors and Halloween treats, as we mentioned. So urban legends in particular, have played through and they draw on a lot of those here and kind of the lasting nature of myths. And of course, this is the whole device that Helen is writing a research paper about this. So we open up with this and it kind of tracks us all the way. Like, how does something become an urban myth or an urban legend? So that's kind of a through line. This is somewhat related to the next one, but the abandonment of the poor by the authorities and the system of outsiders who hijack lower class narratives for their own benefit. So this is the clear line from the original story to the film. You've got the urban myths and legends, and then you also have the abandonment of the poor by the authorities. The opening in the story talks about how beautiful the council estate was just a few years ago before the residents moved in. and destroyed it. And the Helen in the book is looking for graffiti. She's doing her project on graffiti, which is an art form of the lower class that she is then wanting to use in order to gain respect and gain a higher reputation. So kind of building off the back of the lower class. Helen uses Anne-Marie and Jake for information and for access. She doesn't belong to this community, but she walks in like she should and she could, even though Bernadette is like, we look like cops, we're going to get shot. Helen says, no, I want this story. So she goes in, not a lot of compassion for the victims. I think she sometimes uses it. She uses her ability to bring attention to it, kind of that white savior thing. But she is not super sympathetic in this role. Anthony McCoy as a symbol of Cabrini Green's potential for greatness. Candyman takes him away and Helen saves him. Let's see. So, and actually, you talked about this in production. The extras in the film were actual residents of the real-life Cabrini Green projects. One of the quotes I saw said that Rose hired them in order to appease the gangs in the area. So Rose himself was also interacting with these. So the making of the film also interacted with these communities in ways that could be seen, and some have argued are predatory or exploitative, which I think this is a question of exploitation when telling the story of a lower class by someone in an upper class or someone who has $8 million to make a movie who comes in, right? Is that exploitative or is he showing their story? Is it demonstrative or is it exploitative? I don't have the answers, but I think that is an important theme that runs through the film and is also expressed through its production. Connected to this, we have the theme of Black trauma and white on Black violence. This is a place where this film has received a lot of criticism, but also a lot of kudos. So there's a really stark split between analysts of this film, both experts on Black horror film and the history of Black film in America. And so a lot of the stuff I have here is stuff that I have borrowed from them. And again, please check the show notes. I really want to talk about this issue because I think it's important when watching this movie, when analyzing this movie, but it's also very sensitive. And again, coming at this from a middle-aged white woman's perspective, I'm not going to be able to see everything or say everything the way someone else who is from that community would be able to. So, yeah, some argue that the film uses the Black brute trope, right? The large Black man committing violence against the beautiful white woman, that Bernard Rose's use of this, the portrayal of Candyman as a large Black man preying on a white woman, reproduces racist fantasies by focusing on the white protagonist and using Black trauma as a backdrop. But others see it as a complex commentary on race and class. So Bernard Rose was aware of this while filming, and the producers were also concerned about criticism. So he met with the NAACP prior to the release, and they were okay with it. In a 1993 interview, Rose said their response was, why shouldn't a Black actor be a ghost? Why shouldn't a Black actor play Freddy Krueger or Hannibal Lecter? So this is one of the ways that the movie kind of opens up or is supportive and was supported by some in the Black community. Helen serves as a statement on white America's complicity and indifference. So the fact that she lives in an apartment or a project that was then turned into condos and sold, the gentrified, she is kind of an example of gentrification, of exploitation. The 2021 adaptation, I do not want to spoil anything if you haven't seen it, but it is an intentional critique of systemic racism, which I think this 1992 film does as well, but the two in conversation with one another, I think, are the best way to talk about it. And it reframes Candyman as a mythic figure and specifically addresses the intergenerational trauma and white violence committed against Black people in the United States. Overall, I think the consensus is that it is widely considered a critique of racism, though its execution is viewed by some as problematic. So a 2023 article in Humanities by Marco Petrelli at the University of Pisa does a thorough graduate level analysis of how these two films work in concert together. So that's one thing that I would recommend that you read if you're interested. And then There was one specific article that I read that really has a ton of footnotes and stuff that I want to call out from Johnny Lee Wrights. Also, I think Black Horrific is his Twitter handle, their Twitter handle. That came out about 2 years ago, called History, Collective Memory, and More in Candyman. So I really recommend you reaching out or looking for that, and the link will be in the show notes. One final word from Bernard Rose on this issue. He said, I tried to listen to the Black actors and not fall into the Hollywood trap of imposing racial stereotypes and to make people rounded characters, not ciphers or caricatures. The intention going into this was very much to be a critique of racism and the experience of poor Black people in the United States. I think there are ways in which perhaps the film fell a little short. In my opinion, overall, I think that it serves as a critique of a system that has oppressed and committed violence against poor Black people for centuries. And I think as such, I think it does a good job, and it asks these questions.
Especially for the time when it was made.
For the 1992, yeah. 100%. I think, and that's what I love. I think the 2021 version really works beautifully in concert with that. And it is interesting that a film that touches on race in America was made by a white British man, right? Someone from the outside kind of looking in, who took all these things into consideration and spoke with the NAACP and spoke with his actors about it and tried to take them, the fact that Tony Todd was responsible for Daniel Robitaille's backstory. I think this was an ensemble piece and an ensemble construction and really benefited from the contextual switch from Liverpool to Chicago overall. So one more theme that is really interesting that I could talk about a lot, but I won't, about collective memory and reverence. And again, Johnny Lee Wrights does some really interesting stuff with this. Candyman says, I am rumor. It is a blessed condition, believe me, to be whispered about at street corners, to live in other people's dreams, but not to have to be. That's a direct line from the book and in the film. It's one of the things that he says, pretty sure. He tries to seduce Helen with the promise of being remembered. He says one moment of agony and then an eternity of being remembered. What a fascinating incentive to offer. And one might argue that the impulse to procreate is the impulse to leave one's mark, to be remembered, to be forever, to be eternity. And that's what Candyman is offering her. And that's what myths and legends offer. Would you rather live a full life and not have anyone tell a story about you? Or would you rather go out in this big blaze and be remembered forever? I think is a really interesting. I wrote, Candyman is burned, but lives on. He can't be harmed or killed. He cannot be erased. He seduces Helen with this idea that she'll be remembered forever.
Well, and there's that saying that you die twice.
Mm-hmm.
When you die when you die.
Yep.
And then you die again the last time your name is spoken or something like that.
Yeah. 100%. I actually ran into that when I was going down this rabbit hole. So
legacy is definitely something that a lot of people think about. Like you're saying, having children to live on with your name is one aspect of that. But then also to think about it in the entertainment world, like Elvis, he's still not dead.
Still not dead. Yep. And that's mythology. That's legend, right? The mythology, we turn celebrities into these mythological figures as well. So yeah, I think that all of these themes are part of why I think this is such a rich and fascinating text to study.
And for our younger listeners out there, Elvis is the actor standing behind Catherine O'Hara's character at the airport in Home Alone.
Perfect.
Is that it on themes?
That's it on themes. Favorite character time.
Ooh. I didn't even think about this.
I didn't either, so
I was thinking too much about my rating and I think I'm going to upgrade my rating.
Okay.
To a 3-.
Okay.
Low 3.
All right.
I do love this movie, and I do think it's important, and I do think it does all the things that I think a phenomenal horror movie does. And that being said, my favorite character is Trevor. Just kidding.
Fuck Trevor.
Would you stop swearing? This is
Sorry.
not that kind of podcast.
I mean, we always get the explicit tag, so might as well.
Listeners, do you notice the difference between who swears more than the other? Leave it in the comments.
Go ahead.
Oh, man, that's tricky. I'm going to go with Jake.
Okay.
Not from State Farm.
No, the other Jake.
From Cabrini Green. He really is, even though he has a small role and he's a small little guy, he really plays an important role as a catalyst in Helen's story. And really, he starts her journey. I mean, she's already come to Cabrini Green twice, but he really sets her down the path.
Yeah.
And he ends it.
Yeah. Yeah. He has a great character. I think I'm going to go with Bernadette because I think she's just such a good friend. I think she's a great character, a foil for Helen, warns her, but still goes with her. She dies in such a horrible way, but it's being herself, being a friend, showing up, even though her friend has just been accused of kidnapping and killing a dog with a cleaver. She's still like, that's my girl. I'm going to show up. And I think that kind of female friendship is delightful to see. And I think the actress did an incredible job. So. Oh, favorite quote. Do you have one?
I've got my notebook that I left across the room like I like to do. That's a tradition in this podcast. I think I didn't get, just like you were saying, I didn't get all of the full quotes, but I think from the opening line, what's blood for if not for shedding?
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
That's directly from the book. And
yeah, it's very Clive Barker-y.
Yeah, and here I had two and I could not decide between them. Both of them are from the Candyman. I am the writing on the wall, the whisper in the classroom. Without these things, I am nothing. Just encapsulates the power of story to affect the real world. Love it. And then, what do the good know except what the bad teach them by their excesses? Such a cool concept also, that without the bad, there can be no good, which, of course, again, this is where horror shines, offering an environment in which we can ask these incredibly fascinating questions that humans have asked in art and religion and philosophy for as long as we've been around. So, yeah. Okay, enough with the words.
Let's move on to a very truncated, abridged vibe check. Vibes that we bring to you. It's the vibes of the Candyman. Look at my shoes. I'm standing in them. I walked here. I sat on the chair. And now I'm bringing all the vibes to you over there.
Could you talk like that all the time?
I typically do. That's normally how I talk. But not for the podcast. People don't want to hear that the whole time.
No.
I thought about going kind of Tony Toddish, but I didn't even want to try to compete. There's no way.
That'd be pretty tough, yeah. Hard to compete with a legend.
Vibe checks where we talk about some of the elements of the film making that make the film feel like it does, and vibes are always, at the end of a movie. You know how you feel about a movie, even if it's a bad feeling. It can still be very impactful in a positive way.
Yes.
Which I think probably some viewers of this movie felt it is kind of bleak, but masterfully bleak. And a lot of that is due to the cinematographer, in this case, Anthony B. Richmond, another London-born crew person. He was born in 1942, and he won the BAFTA Award for cinematography on Don't Look Now from 1973, which I feel like that movie's come up a few times recently. We haven't seen it. It's like a psychological horror with Sutherland there. Donald.
Yeah, I think that's Huh. Oh, yes, yes, yes. That has been on our watch list for a while.
Other notable films that he did the cinematography for, including Don't Look Now in 1973, The Man Who Fell to Earth in 76. Also in 76, The Eagle Has Landed. He had a bunch of other movies. I'm just hitting some of the notable ones. Candyman in 92, obviously. Then he shot The Sandlot in 1993, Tales from the Hood in 1995, and Legally Blonde in 2001. So kind of an array of films, but all with a distinctive look. His cinematography style, at least specifically to Candyman, can really be recognized by his use of negative space. Candyman always emerges from the darkness.
It's so good.
And that really reinforces the idea that Candyman sort of just exists and he's there. And before he is ever noticed. So he's kind of always lingering. That was the other thing I was going to mention earlier, is that Candyman he doesn't operate with any sort of urgency. He just operates at his own pace, right?
Yeah, but that's part of the inexorable, unstoppable nature of Candyman just oozes through the cinematography and the way he is presented. He never moves in a rushed way.
It was also really focused a lot on architecture in a lot of the external photography. And architecture in this movie is really treated as a mythic space rather than a neutral background. And that's another thing we haven't said yet. I said to you when we were watching it, we would call this Gothic, right? And I definitely, in my research, both the filmmaking, the sound, all really being Gothic, which is interesting because it's juxtaposed with sort of the contemporary urban environment. You sort of have Gothic themes both in the filming and the music, which you would really is more reminiscent of an older time, right? Sort of the Gothic.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm thinking now of the comparisons between Candyman and Dracula. There's that Gothic vibe. And Chicago is a great choice for that because that city has got all sorts of cool architectural stuff, which they use to great effect in this movie. But yeah, interesting. I didn't put together when you said we would call this Gothic, right? I think I was only thinking of the music and I hadn't thought about the cinematography until just now, but I think you're right on.
And also they focused a lot on verticality in this movie. So, right at the beginning, the credits are, the opening credits scene is aerial view of Chicago, focusing on really sort of the bird's eye view of these tall buildings. And that sort of vertical filming is used throughout, whether you're talking about staircases, towers, elevators, there's a lot of that. Then also there's a lot of slow camera movement in this film. Our 14-year-old would probably find this movie kind of boring, I would guess.
At least until the gutting began.
True. But she would have to sit through a lot of slow camera movement. And to me, it doesn't create a slow pace by any means. The movie is a bit of a burn, but not a huge burn. But this slow camera movement really creates inevitability. Again, talking about him always being a presence. It's inevitable.
It was always you, Helen.
So it's more about inevitability than surprise. They're not trying to catch you off guard. That's not the point. The fear is about what's already there, and it's there, and how is it going to show itself? And yeah, I do really like the way this is shot. I think the 90s is a really interesting time for filmmaking and cinematography. In our first episode of Scream, I talked about how that, even though that's one of my favorite horror movies of all time, I'm not very impressed by the cinematography in that. And I do think that the 90s is a weird time. Sometimes the films don't look as charming to me, or I don't even know how to explain it. But the 90s is an interesting time for cinematography. It's not my favorite era, but I think that this movie the execution of the cinematography really suited the movie extremely well. And I don't think it would be the same without it.
It's gothic, but also modern. The color of the graffiti in Cabrini Green contrasted with the whiteness and the paleness and the monotone of the school environment, or that like when Bernadette and Helen are meeting outside in the quad type place with all the columns and stuff. When I think of this movie cinematography, I just think it's rich and syrupy and thick. Like it's just so beautiful. So many shots. When Helen crawls into the bathroom on the other side and goes into the darkness, right? And we know Candyman comes out of the dark. Oh, so cool.
And the conceit that Helen's apartment is basically the same as the Cabrini Green apartments, then to see the contrast in the set design of how those apartments look. Again, Helen's apartment being sort of monotone in a lot of ways against the grime of that abandoned apartment. Specifically, the Ruthie Jean apartment is like two different worlds. It's kind of like the Upside Down in Stranger Things in a way.
Yeah, it is. And the implication being that the difference is the way that they've been cared for or not cared for by the system, right? That when the system realized that it could make a lot more money off of Helen's apartments, it quickly converted a building that has the exact same layout and made it more than habitable, made it desirable, right? She talks about, oh, we spend more money than I want to talk about. And yet it's the same thing as Cabrini Green, but because Cabrini Green was, and that, if you look at the history of that project or many of the projects in the United States, I think the filmmakers showed that contrast as well as talked about it.
Another thing that was interesting to me, talking about the two apartments and also Anne-Marie's apartment, obviously a much better cared for Cabrini Green apartment than the abandoned Ruthie Jean apartment. But those apartments seemed smaller to me. And I don't know if that was just a trick of the set design or if they used actually smaller spaces. I didn't look into that. But did you get that impression, or is that
Seemed
just
more crowded, more cramped?
Yeah, because it really seems like there's a long hallway in Helen's apartment from the kitchen to the bathroom. That distance seems a lot larger. And presumably the bedroom is in between there, between the kitchen and the bathroom, right?
Yeah, and they could be divided differently in the projects versus the condos, right? Like, because they rebuilt the condos, but maybe they combined two small apartments into one, and then so instead of 4 in a row, they had 2 in a row or something. I don't know. I think that's an interesting observation, though.
But that's all I had really for cinematography. Why don't you hit me with special effects?
Cool. So the makeup special effects team included Bob Keane, Gary Tunnicliffe, and Mark Coulier. I did not write down what other things they've worked on, but they utilized really all practical effects here for the most part, really visceral, wet makeup effects. It was very graphic and extremely gory, which I think, you have that slow burn until you get there. But once you get there, the hook, let's talk about the hook. It was a physical hook. It was worn by Tony Todd. There were various versions of it with different amounts of gooey stuff on it. One interesting story, the team found a blacksmith to make the hook, but when he discovered that it was for an adaptation of a Clive Barker story, he backed out. He was a devout Christian and did not want any of his work to be involved in a film by Clive Barker, who was notorious for being a fan of BDSM and all sorts of Hellraiser, this movie. Bernard Rose is the one who insisted on traditional in-camera effects instead of CGI. Thank you for that, sir. It has meant that your movie has lasted through the years. I mean, we have a soft spot for poor CGI or early CGI. It doesn't mean a movie can't be good. But for this movie, which is so visceral, so bloody, so intensely human, I think it would have taken away to have more of the special effects be obvious, because then it takes you out. And I think using the practical effects just made it so intense, especially, the bees. Who would do that today? Nobody. The bonfire scene, there were 1,500 gallons of propane were used to create a 70-foot wide, 30-foot high fire. The crew who worked on Backdraft also worked on Candyman. I thought that was interesting.
Neat.
Same era. There is a documentary on the 4K release that has interviews with the makeup artist. So we have that. Had I had time to watch that, I would have. But there's a lot of behind the scenes information out there about this film. So if you've got that version or rent that version or something, you could learn more about it there. And then also I had put the part about her being hypnotized in special effects because it almost seems like the way her eyes look in those shots. We've talked about that already. But the one thing I couldn't figure out, and I did look into this, is how they made him like hang above her in the mental institution scene. Like he seemed very floaty, and I just don't know how. It must have been harnesses and camera tricks, right? And then also one of the times he does move quickly is when he flies out backward through the window, which I know must have been a harness. Do you know what I was just thinking of? We just watched The House on Haunted Hill. Yes. Not the other one. Yes, we watched the 1959 one. We just watched that. And
the hanging harness.
The hanging harness. Yep, exactly. I was thinking about that window scene. But yeah, so that was one I couldn't find anything specific on. I was curious about that. But I imagine based on Rose's insistence that practical effects be used, that it was all done practically. So how about now we talk about Philip Glass and the sound design in this movie?
Yes, Philip Glass. He was born in Baltimore in 1937. He was educated at University of Chicago, so he would have been familiar with the settings in this film, and studied music at Juilliard. He then studied in Europe with Nadia Boulanger. And he did like a wide range of music, worked in operatic stuff. But some other notable films that he worked on, there's a movie from 1982 called Koyaanisqatsi, spelled Koyaanisqatsi. Koyaanisqatsi. I've been looking at this in my notes for days, wondering how I would say it.
Hold on. I want to... Koyaanisqatsi. Yeah, that seems accurate to me.
Then he did a movie in 85 called Mishima. Then he did The Thin Blue Line in 1988, Candyman in 92, The Truman Show in 1998, which I really love that movie. He did The Hours in 2002 and Notes on a Scandal in 2006, among many other scores. Those are just some of the notable ones. The score specifically for Candyman was built around chorus, pipe organ, and orchestra. Again, really gothic sound to go with the visuals. There's times in the movie that there's sort of a choir, right? Mm-hmm. And that acts as a myth narrator. So that choir is not necessarily a theme for any character. It's not tied to any character. It functions like a Greek chorus or ritual witness.
Oh, cool. That makes so much sense.
And it gives the legend a voice larger than the story itself.
And that's reminding me of, I as an English major, did read a lot of Greek dramas as part of my education. And so I'm thinking specifically of Oedipus, where there's a Greek chorus. I think that's the one I remember the most. But that the Greek chorus serves a function, right, for the drama as witness, like you said. But I hadn't thought of the choir in that regard. So that's really cool.
And then in terms of sort of the technique uses a lot of repetition with gradual variation, which creates that sense of inevitability, that this is always here and it's going to get you eventually. And the music elevates Candyman from slasher figure to urban deity.
Ooh, I like that.
And it really transforms the violence in the movie into ceremony, which is obviously a big part of it. Ties into the themes really well that you were explaining earlier.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that church, like the religion, church, spirituality, yeah, it all ties in. That's really fascinating. And I can see as a pianist I've been poking around a little bit with some of his stuff. Should just buy the sheet music, but I did see, and I don't know if you saw this anywhere, but that he was reportedly furious after viewing the final cut of this film because he thought it would be more artful and less gory and felt like he had been misled.
Interesting.
So yeah, which makes sense. I mean, the music is wicked classy. And I could see that for some people find gore to be so distasteful that they are not able to see beyond it and to the artistry. I would argue that this film is incredibly artsy and artistic, and the music certainly assists in that, but even without the music, it would still be an artsy film that asks big questions and explores big themes. So I think gore is just not to some people's taste, and I am not surprised that he might be one of those people.
I would definitely consider it an artful film, though, with some gore in it.
Yes, totally.
And he knew he was doing a horror film based on a Clive Barker story, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and he also had done work with Bernard Rose on some other films. I saw multiple films on both of their filmographies. So I think perhaps he knew Bernard Rose, but maybe he didn't know fully how deeply they were going to go. Because the horror story, it is pretty graphic. There's one or two scenes, not as many scenes of gore as there are in the movie. But the story is shorter. There's fewer plot points in the story. So interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he read the story and not the script. He had to read the script, right? He had to write these themes for these characters. I don't know. Maybe it's not true either. It was just one thing, but interesting to think about for sure.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap this up before we get into our own music. Do you think it's time for the open mic night, or have I forgotten another section?
No, you've forgotten nothing. I think it's time for the open mic.
All right, let's roll into that.
Let's do it. So I have a tendency to write songs melodically with a lot of piano, which is very similar to much of the score for this film. And so when I was working on this, I wanted to be inspired by the music and by the film, but also try actively to write in a way that was a little bit different than what I usually do. So that is part of what I did here. And also, well, you'll see where it goes in terms of the words. But I think right now the working title is Writing on the Wall. It was always you, dear. Now I'm coming through here. When you took away their fear, you made this so easy for me. Writing on the wall, whispers at the corner, it's the proper order. Story turns to rumor, no one really knew her, never knew the true her, knew what she could do. Living in a dream now, never have to be have, they want you to be so. Just one moment and you will be writing on the wall, whispers at the corner, it's the proper order. Story turns to rumor, no one really knew her, never knew the true her, knew what you could do. No. What is blood for you? Open the door and I step forward. Come with me and you will be remembered evermore. Pain is what it's for. Writing on the wall, whispers at the corner, it's the proper order. Story turns to rumor, no one really knew her, never knew the true her, knew what you could do, no. It was always you, dear.
Woo!
All right.
Is my microphone making
It is.
lines?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see the lines.
Lovely. So that was about Helen, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, some of those lines are heavily inspired by both the book and the movie. Some of them, it is Candyman speaking to Helen, inviting her into memory instead of being alive, but being dead and part of the rumor and the whispers, right? Which is where Candyman gets his power. So it is his seduction song of Helen.
Well, I think that'll be fun to record. I think there's a good chance we're doing yours next week.
I was writing it with that in mind, which I don't usually do, but this time I was like, I want to do something that's going to be like cool to demo. So I'm excited to work on that with you.
Excellent.
All right. Shall we set you up?
I guess so.
Let's do it.
All right. So this is my song inspired by Candyman. It is called Legacy. Since we were freestyle, I kind of wandered a little bit away from... I don't talk about Candyman at all. As we just discussed, legacy is one of the important themes of the film. And when I was writing the song, I was actually kind of really thinking about that. And I don't think I nearly captured the idea that I thought I was going to when I first started writing. But listen, we don't have time to do all stuff all the time, man. Here we go.
For what it's worth, I've tried my best, but I'm not sure who's keeping score. And I've been kind and I'm polite, that hardly matters anymore. Inside my mind I fight the fight. Am I getting any of this right? And when I'm gone, what's left behind? Because I thought I'd be famous, you'd know my name, 'cause you'd sing along to my songs when you're driving. That's what my aim was, but things tend to change, 'cause time comes along and it finds me. Now what's my legacy? Can I behave in ways my children simply cannot afford to ignore? I know I'll make mistakes, but I'll get back up and I'm coming back for more. And in my mind I did alright. That's all you can ask from life. But when I'm gone, what's left behind? Because I thought I'd be famous, you'd know my name, 'cause you'd sing along to my songs when you're driving. That's what my aim was. Things tend to change, 'cause time comes along and it finds me. Now what's my legacy? Here and gone, it's not for long. So everybody sing along. La 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 la, la 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 la. I wrote my song. La 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 la, la 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 la. I hope I didn't get it wrong, 'cause I thought I'd be famous. You know my name, 'cause you'd sing along to my songs when you're driving. That's what my aim was. Things tend to change, 'cause time comes along and it finds me. And what's my legacy? La 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 la, la 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 la.
one, we don't talk about this a lot necessarily, but your first instrument were the drums. And I am always just so pleased by the rhythm of your songs. And you've got that kind of opening part. I love that. It's so good. Your songs always have that groove. And also this could have been like a no-name song. This could have, like, you went far away from the Candyman thing, but I totally see how it's inspired. There was one more thing. Oh, I wish that we didn't have other lives so that we could record both of these songs because that sing-along part in that song, I was already starting to come up with harmonies, but I know we don't have time to do demos of everything. But
well, maybe you'll fall in a hole before next week and I'll have to record this song. Or maybe you'll be Candyman.
Maybe I will be Candyman, but if I get Candyman, don't say my name in the mirror.
Candymanded.
Stop. It was really good.
Well, thank you, love.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was fun, but I believe we're losing light.
There it goes. Let's get back in our chairs. You're in your chair. I'm on the floor.
It's a long story. Okay, we're losing light. It's time to shut down this production today.
Let's do it.
What a movie, Candyman.
So glad we spun that. Really nice.
Speaking of spinning, today we've decided to do something different. We're not going to spin our wheel.
We're not.
So that means we've personally selected the next film we're going to do a deep dive on in 2 weeks, on which we're going to do a deep dive.
Yeah, there it is.
And the Academy Awards are not something we talk about very often when we're talking about our favorite genre of film here, right? Is that fair to say?
That is definitely fair to say.
We've mentioned it a few times, like, hey, this was nominated for stuff. Psycho had some noms in the Academy Awards. Do people say noms?
They don't, but now I'm hungry. Nom, nom, nom.
That's weird because you were just eating and I was telling you to stop. Not because you...
That's why I'm eating.
It was because
I'm hungry. I took one bite of my granola. Gosh.
It was loud crunching. That's why I told her to stop eating. I don't usually tell you to stop eating. I'm always like, eat up. Buckle up, baby. Here's some food. But this, 2025 was a pretty strong year for horror, and you saw some bigger films, and some of those got some recognition in the awards circles. And the movie with the most nominations of all time happens to be a horror film called Sinners.
Yeah.
And I really like that movie, Sinners. And we thought to celebrate its success that we would skip spinning the wheel, and next episode for the deep dive in 2 weeks, we will cover Sinners.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we didn't do this on purpose, but looking at Sinners after looking at Candyman to see, I think there's definitely some thematic things that will echo from one to the next. And so seeing a movie from 2025 after seeing a movie from 1992 dealing with some of those same issues, I think will be really interesting. That's where my mind heads. And also a movie where music plays a really big role, right?
Yeah.
So come back for that in 2 weeks, but not before you come back next week. Time is hard. For our encore episode, where we will present a demo of one of today's songs, and we'll also do something else fun and exciting that you'll have to come back to hear. Should we, however, we're not going to spin for a movie, but should we spin for a gimmick for how we're going to write our song inspired by Sinners?
Way ahead of you.
That's rare. Sick burn. I know.
Rose burn. Wait, no, Ruby Rose. I gotta go.
Ruby Rose burn.
Ruby Rose burn. No names.
All right, no names. Okay, that'll work.
I think the last time we had that was for The Descent, which worked out real well.
The point is to write a song that is inspired by the movie but doesn't reference it specifically.
Right.
So it could be something that you could play for someone and they would not know it was inspired, which is a great choice for this movie in particular, I think. There's such a rich there's a lot to draw on. So, and I'm psyched we get to watch it again. Very cool.
Next week, I think I would like to do the encore about urban legends.
Cool.
So we will do that. So join us next week in our Candyman encore, where we'll be discussing some of the classic urban legends. We haven't had a chance to do that yet, and I think it'll be a long time before we cover the movie Urban Legends.
Probably, given our tendency to put really good movies on the wheel.
So, anyway, until then, you can find us anywhere you socialize on the medias at OMNLDpod. You can also email us at omnldpod@gmail.com.
Yes, indeed.
Leave some comments, rate things, subscribe, click that bell or something.
Yeah, something like that. You can find me also on some of those socials at Chill Out Barbara. I'm also on Letterboxd, which we as a podcast are not, but I am on Letterboxd at Chill Out Barbara, and also in a few other places. So if John is not, but I do sometimes write little tiny reviews, little micro reviews of some of the movies that we watch. So join us there as well if you would like.
All right. Well, it's been a great time talking with you about Candyman.
Sure has been.
Candyman.
Don't do it.
Candyman.
Stop it, Johnny.
Candyman.
I mean, we've already said it like 37,000 times, but please don't say it
And
now.
next week we'll be talking about urban legends.
Great. Thank you.
Not the movie, the things, the legends, the myths.
The myths, the legends. All right.
And until then, it's been great talking to you.
All right. See ya.
Candyman.